what we do then, when we talk about courage and dragons, which is the point of this particular session, and I'm kind of sticking with the fire imagery there, that, you know, the difference between heaven and hell is less than a hair's breadth, and that the difference between believing thought and not believing thought is a hair's breadth. You don't feed the monstrous thoughts, and think of it as like fuel. You can intensify, you can pour fuel onto the fire, and by going over and over and over and over and over the thoughts. So, and we get addicted to them, and this is what the manacles that William Blake talks about, and this is what the manacles that you see on the devil card in the Rider-Waite pack is about. These addictions, the way that we're addicted to our own suffering, and we even cling to that idea of our own identity and our own suffering so much more that we're almost it's almost more than we want to be happy, if that makes sense. So if Milton says the mind is its own palace and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven, and this idea of the visionary dramatic form that we make our own hell in our own mind, think of this analogy where we are addicted to these mind-formed manacles that we see in William Blake's Poem of London. We are addicted to our thoughts, ruminated thoughts. We are addicted to desires. We are addicted to wanting things to be better or different or change to what they are. Whereas mindfulness says that we shouldn't do that. We should practice acknowledgement. Not acceptance, that sounds too passive, acknowledgement. And we're even addicted to that identity of ourself of suffering, even if that means there is an alternative to want to be happy. So suppose something, let's look at the analogy, suppose somebody did something wrong to us or something bad happened to us some months or years ago. And then we constantly tell ourselves how horrible that person has been or how horrible that event has been. And we constantly cling to that, and it makes us more unhappy and more dissatisfied. And what we don't do is we don't move on. Now, I don't like to quote sort of like too much pop, films, because I know Slavoj Žižek doesn't really like. Does he like Kung Fu Panda? Well, anyway, Kung Fu Panda is, at the end of the day, why are we ruminating over the past? Because it's history and we can't change it. Why are we worried about what might happen? Because it might never happen. And the thing is that we need to cling on is to now, which is the present moment. And that's what mindfulness does. It keeps us in the present moment. That's the important thing. But what do we end up doing? We constantly, I've taught this is a default mechanism, isn't it? The default mechanism is the fact that your mind does this anyway, this distracting principle and ruminating, because it's a protection mechanism, but it also freezes us from not wanting to move forward and taking a challenge and having the courage to do things. So what am I saying about courage and dragons? I suppose in a way I'm kind of saying to move on, to try to be happy, though I'm not talking about happiness. I'm talking about happiness is not what I'm saying happiness is. There's two types of happiness, isn't there? The happiness is the self-indulgent here and now, the chocolate bar, I want it. And there's true happiness, according to the Buddhist principles of mindfulness, which is well-being. Well-being and peace, equanimity, balance. Not the chocolate bar and the soft bubble baths. Soft bubble baths and spoiling yourself sometimes too much, self-care doesn't really cut it. Especially if you're using indulgence as a distraction. You have to be honest and be willing to do something about it. That's the authenticity of mindfulness. And you have to face your dragons head on. I suppose the kids' cartoon film is about that, really. How to train your dragon. The young kid who does that, in a way he does it, doesn't he? Is it Hiccup? I can't remember it, but it's a good story for kids. To have the courage to see the suffering of the second arrow as being fundamentally that, thoughts, and have the courage to explore the issue, because if you don't, it'll always pop up until it's resolved. So let's do a little practice about it, and reminding ourselves, fundamentally, don't go into something that's too challenging. You have your resourcing tools, and we've got 6, remember them. Focus on your breath in your centre. Focus on the ground that's supporting you, your feet and your legs and your hands, whatever's touching. Okay, you're grounding. Name and label whatever it is. The moment you name and label it, you put your distance between you and it. And say it in a compassionate, caring voice as if a friend would. And embrace it with a gentle, tender touch. Because that painful emotion, whatever it is, you have to embrace it. You have to say, look, like a tender-hearted love of compassion for a child. Because at the end of the day, whatever experience you've had, sadness, doubt, self-criticism, everybody suffers. Everybody's had that pain and everybody hurts. But it's still part of you, because that's the part of the journey that's made you who you are. Could you imagine if you've never ever suffered at all and you've never experienced any suffering? Where is the wisdom in that? And refocus on something else, another sense. Touch, taste, smell, sound. Or pendulate, going between it and a numb or comfortable sensation in the body where you go backwards and forwards. So those are your 6. Always remember your 6 techniques. So let's do it. So let's practice it, because we've got about 8 minutes, because I talk too much, don't I? I talk too much, so we've got about 6 minutes to practice this. So remember, always you practice. Okay, so when you're practicing, it's about challenge. It's like anything. Rather than, we shouldn't always be nice to ourselves sometimes, and let ourselves off the hook. It's a bit like, I'll give you an example. It's like when I've seen a client and they'll say they haven't been doing any of the practice, and I'll say, but then you have to explore why they've not done the practice. Rather than going, oh yeah, whatever, be nice about it. Being nice and facing your dragons, isn't it? What is the issue? Sit with it. But remember, you're not. It's this practice, like all mindful practices. It's not about achieving anything. It's not about trying to change anything. It's not for wishing that things would be different. We do that all the time. That's a problem. We're always constantly wishing our lives. Oh, I'm suffering. I wish my life were different. But that's not the point of. Distracting yourself from that, or wishing it to be different or better. That's what mindfulness is about. It's about sitting with it. Mindfulness is not about results. That's the paradox. What did it say about the paradox? About self-compassion. Okay, you've got to work with it. So let's do what is. It's about acceptance of what is, and trying to embrace it. Buddhism, really fundamentally, at the end of the day, is what is Buddhism? Buddhism is about the fact that everybody suffers, but it is a tool or a technique to be released from that suffering thought, the ruminating thought that keeps us trapped there. So, right, mentally alert and physically relaxed, okay, because we're noticing. So, nice tall spine, chin, long spine, nice, okay? So, eyes closed or soft gaze, okay? If you're going to be triggered, if you feel like you could be triggered or emotional, soft gaze is best because you're orientating yourself in time and space, okay? So, I'm just going to have a soft gaze, I always do, okay? And I just want you to remember that it's about not trying to change anything. I just want you to feel the contact between your body and the floor. Just focus on your hands and your thighs, your hips on the floor, your feet on the floor. And just take 3 deep cleansing breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And feel that dropping down into the body. Just drop in and drop down. And just check in with your internal weather system. Just a snapshot. We're not looking for reasons why or trying to change anything. And what is your internal weather system now? Where are you on an emotional level? And just settle into and notice that experience, your internal weather report. Without facing anything too difficult, see if you can consider this question. What do you not want to face in yourself right now? And start to be curious about whatever that is. Be curious about the emotional aspect of it. Perhaps you notice a space of tension, of tightness, of unease somewhere. And if at any point you need to, as you notice whatever that is, you can always connect with the breath or the ground, name or label with a soothing, compassionate voice, or embrace it with a gentle touch. You can place a hand wherever you feel it, and just breathe into wherever it is. Just notice, just to be curious with it, just to sit with it. And if it's too much, you can still keep focusing on the hands, the ground, the touch, your breath, the label. Just noticing. See if you can give it a shape, a texture, or a colour. And that shape or the texture or the colour, attach a label or emotion to it. Acknowledge it. Put out the welcome mat to it. Notice it. It's like being prepared to open that door, isn't it? Seeing what's on the other side. Standing in front of your dragon, facing it. When you face it, it diminishes. If it's too big right now, just curiously play around the edge of it. And keep alternating between that, the shape, the colour, the texture of it, the edge of it, and the sensations perhaps of your hands and your feet. Just go backwards and forwards. You can always come back to the breath. Trying not to be worried about distractions. Just notice where your mind has gone and simply just come back to where you are, your focus. Just notice and just go, thinking, distracted. Always label, notice, come back. And then when you feel ready, just come back to the contact between your body and the floor. Sounds. So, that might not have be effective at this particular point, but think of it as a practice that you can come back when anything arises. So when anything does arise, that you can sit with it, be curious, don't ignore it. You can't heal unless you feel. It will always pop up if it's not acknowledged. Always remember, label, acknowledge, sit with it, comfort it. Comfort it like a child, a tender-hearted child. That part of you that's maybe sad or in pain, imagine it's like a child that's feeling that and that you are giving it some love and compassion as if you were, because therefore you're giving it to yourself. So, I think that's sort of today's practice, really. A little bit of philosophy there, a little bit of literature, can't help it. But then again, you know, what is literature? It is sort of like all universal truths about philosophy. They all give us a window into universal human experience. So I'll probably do less talking and probably shorter practices in the future. Just coming back to alternating different ones that we've done. Don't forget, Wednesday is always our strong empowering class, grounded, and Friday is our down regulating the nervous system, relaxing. So we've also got our other mindfulness sessions as well. So take care.